All right, I'm going to get started here. Welcome everyone to the Technical Steering Committee meeting for CitrineOS. CitrineOS is a Linux Foundation Energy project, and this is the Linux Foundation's antitrust policy notice. If you're unfamiliar with it, I suggest you take a moment to read it through. CitrineOS is an open source charging station management system project originally based on the 2.01 version of the OCPP protocol. It's originally authored by S44 Energy and was adopted as a Linux Foundation Energy project. You can find our GitHub IO page where there's a guide on how to get started with the project and about its technical specifics at citrineos.github.io. And we also post these recordings, meeting recordings, as well as other useful things like webinars on related topics on the YouTube channel S44 Insights. So the current state of development, our most recent release was 1.7.1 CitrineOS Core. It came out, I believe, 3 weeks ago now. And it added ARM image support. So the project is Dockerized. You can get started with running the CitrineOS Docker containers from GitHub pretty quickly. And previous to now, it was not a simple matter to create images that are compatible with ARM, meaning that it could be a little bit tricky to get CitrineOS to run on things like M1 Apple chips. That's been simplified and is now much more accessible. The Everest charging simulator is something that the project has used for a while. The protocol that I mentioned earlier, OCPP, is what the project is based on, and it describes the communication between a charging station and the cloud. Everest is sort of our sister project in Linux Foundation. They are the software that handles the OCPP logic on the station side. So with a simulator, you can have a full conversation, so to speak, in OCPP between Everest and CitrineOS. But previous to now, only the 2.01 version was available. Now we've added support for 1.6. We also added support for an additional 1.6 message. We have core functionality in OCPP 1.6, the older version of the protocol, but some of the advanced use cases have not been fully implemented. Support for the update firmware message was added in this patch release, which is a way to update the firmware on charging stations over the air. Our next release candidate is going to be a quite large change. It's all to support having a larger protocol stack upstream of the OCPP layer. So we have an OCPI layer project, CitrineOS OCPI, that has an OCPI 2.2.1 implementation, which we are rounding out in this release. And in order to do that, there's some changes that we're making. There's going to be a set of interfaces that describe all of the data that CitrineOS core manages and persists to the database. And we're going to be adding fields to those objects needed to support upstream protocols such as OCPI. And in order to make this more organized, the project was originally based on OCPP 2.01, and so it extended objects related to that protocol in the data that it persisted. And we are going to be moving away from that. So instead, there will be generic data objects that contain the same information but are not directly referencing the OCPP 2.01 protocol, which will make it easier to expand the data that is being persisted by CitrineOS core. So as I mentioned, alongside these changes to core, we're making updates to our OCPI layer. It's currently not capable of running on its own. It runs as an augmentation of the core services. So that's changing. The OCPI layer will now have its own microservice. And in order to support that, we're moving to a loose coupling between core and OCPI using our GraphQL API and a Postgres integration with listen / notify for data pushing. And as we're rounding out the OCPI 2.2.1 implementation, we're going to be making some changes to make it more accessible to implement other versions of OCPI. Most notably, there is now a 2.3.0 version out, and there will in the near future be an OCPI 3.0. And finally, the operator UI, which is the native UI for the project, is also going to be updated. And that's primarily just to support the additional data that is persisted as part of the changes to the other layers. Looking beyond these release candidates that will probably be going out in the next month or so, we have some other roadmap items. We will also be returning to OCPP 1.6 in order to complete those advanced use cases I mentioned earlier. And we'll be looking to implement some of the newer versions of the protocols we support. So OCPI 2.3, which I mentioned, and also OCPP 2.1. So you can find at the CitrineOS repo, which is the main repo under the CitrineOS GitHub organization, a description of our community rules and standards. Right now, the project was initially authored by S44, and we've had a module, CitrineOS Payments, that was submitted by Stackbox. And we have a very active Discord channel, which you can find an invite to on our GitHub IO page. There's over 450 members on the Discord channel, many of whom have indicated an intent to contribute. If you have any questions about using the project or about the project's future, you can post there, and someone will get back to you quite quickly. There's a few roles that are laid out in the community guidelines. One of them is the contributor role. All that you need in order to be a contributor is to have at least one approved and merged pull request to the project. And there's no ongoing responsibilities associated with that, but you do get listed in the list of contributors. There's a more advanced role, the committer role, which does involve some responsibilities that gives you a say in the future of the project. And speaking of, the roadmap that I mentioned is not set in stone. We have in the past and will in the future change what our focus is for the project, depending on feedback from the community as to what features are most important. This would be an open mic session for anyone new to the project who wants to introduce themselves, but I can see that we don't have anyone new today. So after this meeting, you can check out our GitHub IO page, and you can also subscribe to listserv. And this here is an invite to the Discord channel, which you can also find, as I mentioned, on the GitHub IO page. And that is it for today's meeting. Thank you all.